Well, in the Canadian Senate, when I spoke about Bill C-16, the transgender bill, I introduced the term "I'm a victim, therefore I am." Right? And of course,
That's good.
you know about my whole collective Munchausen, which is a nice segue to a new form of Munchausen that I have diagnosed. It's called Islamic-based collective Munchausen, or Islamophobia, F FAUX, faux, fake.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I think you know where I'm going with this. What do you think of our latest hijab hoax story in Canada?
Right. So I know that there was this young girl who claimed that her hijab got ripped off by somebody turned out to be a fakery, whatever, a hoax, whatever you want to call it. Without getting into too specifics about the girl or the family or any of that stuff, what I can tell you is the part that I know that I'm very well versed in, which is how the media and how social media and Twitter particularly deals with these things. So when this happened and it got exposed, I think it was Eric Weinstein. You can check his Twitter feed. He screenshotted the original Twitter Moments thing about it, which is, girls' hijab gets ripped off. It's a more Islamophobia, blah, blah, blah. And then eventually there's a Huff. They never post that in Moments when it gets retracted, of course. HuffPo then I think put up an article saying that it was a hoax. But it's this rush
Right.
to see certain people as victims all the time and certain people as oppressors all the time. And sadly, it's a really sad state of things that we consistently find that these cases related to hijabs or Muslim hate crimes often are hoaxes.
Right.
By the way, some of the things that happen to Jews are hoaxes. Some of the things that happen to the guy when there were all those bomb alerts at JCCs, Jewish community centers throughout America, it turned out to be an Israeli guy. So this is not. I'm not just making this about Muslims, obviously. But we have to be very weary about these dog whistle events that then the media always tries to make a broader issue on how we view a certain set of people. And in this case, we are talking about Muslims. Look, the simple facts, if you just look at the studies, I'm not sure how it stands in Canada, but I would imagine it's similar. Jews are the number one victim of hate crimes based on an ethnicity in America. And it's that way every year. The left doesn't view Jews as victims because Jews have become successful. Why did Jews become successful? Because Jews cared about education and secularism and becoming part of the melting pot that is America. It's the great success story that actually now Chinese and Asian immigrants generally are being part of, and Indian immigrants, and most other immigrants, by the way, Irish immigrants and Italian immigrants.
Nigerians are very successful.
Nigerians, absolutely. That all of these groups are, if you become part of the melting pot, that's what you're supposed to do. You bring the goodness of your community in, but you become something broader. The left doesn't really want that to be anymore. They want us to be judged on our immutable characteristics. They're trying to create basically a coalition based in guilting the rest of us, a coalition that really all hates itself and really all has its own competing interests, but they think that's enough to stop. And that's why it's so strange that these days I do find my ideological allies to be much more on the right. And I think people that I would have thought were my enemies, not enemies because I never view things in those terms, but my ideological opponents, let's say, a couple of years ago, now I find a lot of commonality with. And again, when I have disagreement with abortion or death penalty with Shapiro, okay, but we want to live in the same society. We want to be governed by basically the same laws. But for the things that we have disagreement about, let's do it. Let's do it.
Well, what amazes me, two points. Number one, the woman who's pushing the motion, hoping to it eventually becomes a bill in Canada, the M103 Islamophobia motion, is a MP, a member of parliament, who is, I think, maybe Pakistani Muslim woman. And whenever I have engaged her on Twitter, it's always been one way. I tag her or something. I mean, always politely, respectfully, sometimes, of course, satirically and sarcastically, but it's always very polite. It's I never insult. Well, that person who is a representative, she is a parliamentarian, and I, as a citizen, and certainly one who's got a platform, tries to challenge you on some of your positions. What does she do? She blocks me. This is a member of parliament who I am trying to engage regarding a public motion that could pass as law. So that's number one. Number two, what I was going to say is the issue of collective Munchausen is uniquely apropos here, because in the case of the hoaxes with all the hijabi stuff, it really becomes an infinite loop of Islamophobia, right? So first, the crime itself, which turns out to not be a crime, is a manifestation of how Canadians are vile Islamophobes. Then if anybody exhibits ire once the story comes out that it's fake, that demonstrates that you are an Islamophobe. And then
incredible. And
then when the parents, who now that they've been found out and put out an apology, if you don't then give them $10 million as retribution, just like Omar Khader, then you are an Islamophobe. So there is nothing throughout this, all roads lead to you being Islamophobic. It's exactly like the example that I gave. You may may not have heard me mention it before, but for those of you who haven't, it's worth repeating. There was a study that was done in Israel by a doctoral student where a Jewish student, she wanted to identify. Do you know the story? Have I mentioned the story before?
Oh, about the rapists, right?
Exactly. So let me just mention it in case somebody missed it.
Yeah.
So she wanted to demonstrate that, the Israeli IDF soldiers are these rampant rapists who rape, hapless Palestinian women. And when she went out to test her thesis, it turns out that there were no documented cases of rape by IDF soldiers on Palestinian women. And therefore she concluded that the reason for that is that they so marginalize and so dehumanize the Palestinian women that they weren't even worthy to being raped. Aha, therefore, look what disgusting pigs. So it doesn't matter what happens. The IDF soldier is a subhuman pig. And that's exactly what you find with Islamophobia. We have to get to the conclusion that Canadians are Islamophobic. All roads lead to Islamophobia. It's grotesque.
Of course. And look, I mean, I know you know this and your audience know this. A phobia is an irrational fear. Islam as a set of ideas, not your Muslim neighbor, obviously, and my Muslim friends, many people that I had in my house for dinner and all sorts of other stuff. The set of ideas, here, I'll let you do it. What does it say in the Hadith about the Jews? What's the line?
Oh, at the end of times, the Jew will be hiding behind the tree, and it will say to you, oh, there's a Jew hiding behind me, come and smite him.
Right, okay. So that's what the Hadith says about Jews. So if you're a Jew and you're a little leery about Islam, that doesn't mean it's a phobia. That means you read something and you go, wait a minute, a certain amount of people prescribe to these ideas. I don't want to be bigoted towards these people as a whole, but if some people are saying at end of times, they're going to find me behind the tree and kill me, this is not a phobia. It is also simply a fact. And again, everything, it's so pathetic that we've been put in a position where all of us who dare have a freaking iota of synapses still going in our brain have to constantly defend ourselves from bigotry. A simple fact is that in the 40 or whatever it is, some odd Muslim nations on earth, where Islam is basically the ruling set of ideas, that it is not good for any minority. And I think you can make a strong argument that it's not even good for the Muslim people there because they're not very free because of this set of ideas. But there's virtually no Jews. I went to Egypt in 1997. There was literally one Jew.
Right.
There was one guy in the old Jewish quarter. He had some issues, this guy, but literally one guy. There are, that this set of ideas is not good for anyone. What's good for us is liberalism, is freedom, is Enlightenment values, is secularism. And so it's not bigoted to talk about that. It just isn't. But they've used this in a way, and you're right, they use it in both ways. Right. So you're either you're an Islamophobe if you say something, and then if you don't say, I mean, they've tricked us in all of these different ways. But the simple fact is, it also, a kafar, right? A kafir.
Well, and how you say it properly?
Yeah.
And kafir is in singular, kuffar is in plural.
Okay, so the reason I wanted to do that because as a native Arabic speaker, although you don't get credit for that because your Jew card somehow destroys your Lebanese Arab card,
right.
Even though your family was literally kidnapped by Palestinian terrorists and you had to flee the country.
By the way, before you go on, the hadith that you're talking about, which is at the end of time, I didn't have to wait till the end of time to experience it. I experienced this. I experienced it in my. I hid behind the tree so that my head doesn't come off, and then I got into a plane.
there's a subtly great point you're making there. Guess what? End of time is never coming. I hate to tell that to all the religious people that might be watching this. This thing ain't going anywhere. This thing's just going to continue, okay? So, but if you believe end of times is coming, it can be right now. Right. So when you say, wait till the end of time, find the Jew behind the tree, you might think that is right now. But the point is that all of us who are non-believers are thought of as kuffars within the Islamic system. And we are supposed to pay a tax to live in their societies. We're not allowed to practice religion or non-religion freely or any of those things. Again, I don't want to I've sort of become exhausted by this topic because there's almost no benefit. Certainly professionally, there's a lot of costs that comes with this. And it's not like any of the people that will slander or libel us will stop because we've explained ourselves clearly a zillion times. So I've become sort of exhausted by this topic. You know, I've put so many either ex-Muslims or Muslim reformers on my show. I've become very good. Faisal Saeed al-Matar has become one of my best friends on earth. But this topic, I just find that it's something that, you know, you can touch for a while. And then, I don't know, I hope that there's somebody watching this that'll go, you know what, if Dave is a little tired of this, maybe I'll jump in and do it instead. But in this regard, I'm happy to talk about it with you. But you know, there's just like an endless drag with this thing that's not fun.
Yeah, I hear you. Let's do a few personal stuff. You ready?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
So this is actually, I'm quoting an exact. How did we each? This is someone writing to me. How did we each, in reference to us, discover our respective paths and personal meanings, and what are some mistakes and sacrifices that we've made to get there? I'll just cede the floor to you. You could answer it for yourself.
Well, this is basically they're asking me to tell my life story, but briefly, you know, I studied. I was a political science major in college. The day I got out of college, I called a comedy club and I said I wanted to start doing stand-up. I did stand-up in New York for about 12 years. With all the ups and downs that comes with, and a miserable year on the road and standing out in Times Square with handing out tickets in neither sleet nor rain nor snow, just no matter what it was like out there doing it. I lived that sort of miserable life as a comic. By the way, I'm making my return to stand-up this weekend at the Comedy Store in LA. Because the left has so wrecked comedy and these Chelsea Handlers and Sarah Silvermans and these moral preening buffoons. You're doing a full set?
You're getting up there doing a full set?
I'm doing a full set. Wow. I'm back, baby.
Wow.
So we'll see, because every part of me doesn't want to do it. I feel like I live that life, and I don't really want to go back to it. But the part when I'm on stage, from the moment I grab the mic to say goodnight, I love that. And we'll see. I don't. I'm really 50-50 on it. I have no idea what's going to happen at this point.
Why? Is it that you just miss the rush of hearing people laugh at what you're saying that you don't get in your current forum? Why would you go back to that now that you've left it?
Well, it's a little bit, so partly that, you know, I'm having basically somewhat serious conversations here, although there's a lot of fun and there's a lot of laughing often within them, but it's not just that thing that stand-up is. Stand-up is something that until you've done it, you can't really describe that feeling of getting laughs in a live room, but it's actually not for the feeling anymore, because I'm sort of past the feeling, and I do a lot of speaking at colleges where I can incorporate a little stand-up and I do some crowd work, and I know what that is to get that laugh. For me, it's that I did it for so long, and a lot of people say, Dave, you used to do stand-up, where's the video, this, that. And it's like, I feel like I sort of have to do a half-hour special that we'll tape probably at a theater in LA and just post it and just say, so I did do it. I want people to know that it was part of what I did. Maybe that's not even the best reason to go back and do something. And maybe after Saturday, I won't feel that way. But we'll see. But as far as my adventure, I was a poli-sci major, then did stand-up. I realized that people weren't getting out of stand-up the way they used to. You know, people had this idea that it was still 1985 and you could, you know, if you were Ellen DeGeneres or Tim Allen or Louis Anderson or Roseanne Barr or any of these people, Seinfeld, that you would go on the Tonight Show, Johnny would sit down with you, and then you'd get a sitcom. And that happened to everybody in that age if you were good. I realized that Leno wasn't doing that. The late night guys weren't helping anybody anymore. Sitcoms had started to crumble because of reality TV, so no one was getting out of the clubs. I became very frustrated with it, started getting into podcasting, Sirius XM, eventually the Young Turks, and where I am now. And I think the one good thing that I did throughout that was I never said, this is my goal and here's how I have to get here. I always just had this sort of amorphous goal of I want to say what I think, whether that's through comedy or now through interviewing and doing things like this. And I want to get there and be okay. I don't need to be rich, but I want to live a comfortable life.
Right.
And I want to get there. And I always really tried, and I think this is something that I've been good at, when things change and I realize, wow, I can get more fans or followers by tweeting than I can by wasting 3 hours in a comedy club with a bunch of self-hating alcoholics, well, then I'll better be on Twitter, or I can put up YouTube videos and people will start remembering me, as opposed to, who was that seventh white guy who performed in the middle? He was really great, but looked like everybody else, and all that stuff. So the journey for me has just been being aware of the way the landscape was changing the whole time. And I've tried to be very aware of that. And I think even now, I don't want to publicly say to you all the things that I see changing right now, but privately I'd be happy to say. But I see a lot of movement. I see a lot of movement right now in places that people like you and I are going to have to kind of shift to. Right. And I plan on doing it.
See, my experience, I'll just answer the same question much more briefly than you. In my case, I think I had a clear idea of what I wanted to become. So I was always very good and in love with two things, soccer and my books. And so I always said, even when I was a very young kid, I was going to become a professional soccer player. And then eventually one day I would become a professor. So in that sense, my path was already set. But, you know, which field I would specialize in, what form it would take, in that sense, that was more open, very much like the way it happened with you. And of course, I could have never envisioned that I would, even though I'm someone who's very extroverted, very, very social, I never imagined that there would be such a thing like the tools that we have today that would allow a professor to have the type of platform that I currently have. So that was in a sense accidental. But the minute that I knew that these possibilities existed, I jumped on the bandwagon. And so in my case, I think it was a bit more clear from the get-go, with some changes along the way. For example, I didn't think that I would become a behavioral scientist at first. When I went to do my PhD, I came from a mathematics background, and I thought that I would be a mathematical modeler. So I would be studying human behavior, but very much from a quantitative perspective. And it was, in a sense, accidental that I hooked up with a supervisor who really convinced me to go the behavioral science route. So in a sense, I had a path, but then I was open to new input from the environment.
And by the way, when you have a path, if you're so rigidly, stuck on your path, 99.99% of times, it ain't going to go like that. So you have to. I mean, I don't know anyone that set out a path and it worked out exactly as they wanted. Even for the people that I know that are my age now and that are still in the career that they studied in college and all that, still other things happen, be it your marriage, your children, anything in your life, financial troubles. Things just don't go the way you want to plan. So you just have to be awake enough to change and to evolve as the world is evolving with you.
Well, look, it is an adaptive quality that we have as human beings to exhibit behavioral plasticity. Behavioral plasticity is the fancy term for the fact that, yes, while we have a, if you like, quote, rigid human nature, but it's not as rigid as we think, in that in different environments we'll adapt accordingly. So we have behavioral plasticity. It is part of being human to not be so rigid. Speaking of children, I hope this is not too personal, are you guys thinking at all of ever having children, or is your show your child?
Gad, my mother-in-law obviously paid you for this, and she will pay accordingly. I hope you got a pretty penny out of this.
I'm getting a house in Southern California from her payment.
Yeah. We're trying to get you here, man. Anything I can do to get you here, it would be great to have you here. Thank you. There is no one that absorbs sun like Gad Saad. It's truly, people think they can see it on the screen through YouTube, but I've seen it in person, and it's a color, it's a richness that really can't be quite described. There's no word really for it. Look, David does want kids more than I do. My feeling is I've invested so much of my life force, my energy, my being to all of this stuff. And even though we've hit a nice stride here, I still feel like I'm at the beginning, and maybe I'll never give up that feeling. And I hope that I do one day, but I really do feel that I'm at the beginning. And even though, we're basically doing well, about the YouTube monetization, things go up and down. I'm building a business. I have, a huge mortgage because of what we had to do with the studio and all this and all the costs that all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. Maybe, I think, is the best answer that's truly the most honest answer that I can give you is maybe.
I hope you want me sharing. And then I have two more questions, and we'll wrap it up. I love the question to that exact, the answer that you gave me to that exact question the first time that I posed it. I think it was after I had done your show, and you said, well, we don't have any children yet, but we're going to keep trying.
I've told that joke so many times that I had suspected that I've told it to you before, and I didn't want to insult you, you know?
I appreciate that. Okay, two more questions.
Yeah.
The first one, I remember when I was an MBA student, I had taken, in my second year as an MBA student, I took a course with a gentleman by the name of Professor Jay Conger, who's a world-renowned guy when it comes to study of leadership, charismatic leadership. He's actually now moved from McGill University, well, many years ago now, to one of the McKenna colleges. I can't remember, one of the, you know what I mean, the sister colleges in California. I can't remember which one. And I think he lives in Manhattan Beach. Anyways, in the second year of the MBA, I took a course with him called Group Dynamics, where he would handpick, I think it was 5 or 6 MBA students, and we effectively would do sort of this group therapy course for 13 weeks. It was really quite an extraordinary course. One of the assignments in the course was for us to read a book by Eric Berne called Games People Play. It's a psychoanalytic book that deals with something called transactional analysis. Sorry for the big words. I'll explain in a second where I'm going with this. And then his disciple, Claude Steiner, wrote a book called Scripts People Play, which basically, let me just summarize it, and then you're gonna see the question. His theory is that there are these life scripts that we receive, very much in the same way that an actor receives a script, and then he has to abide by that script as an actor. Typically, in his theory, the script is oftentimes, if you like, a dynamic between the parent and the child. So, for example, the parent says, "You're going to be the great hope. You're going to get us out of poverty. You're going to be the whatever." And then that script is then internalized by the child, who then goes through a trajectory in life playing out that script. So I understand that this is a very deep question, but if I asked you right now, is there a fundamental 1 or 2 scripts that you think would be the ones that have shaped your life trajectory? Are there any that you could think of?
Ooh.
Big stuff.
That's good, SAAD. That's good. That's good. I really need to think for a minute here. So give me a second to really kind of process.
I was kind of torn whether I should ask it or not, because I realized that it requires a lot of deep introspection. So I don't.
I'm totally glad that you did. Well, I would first answer it by saying this. My parents never thrust anything like that upon me. I'm the oldest of 3 children. I'm actually the oldest of the generation. So out of all my cousins, I'm the oldest. So I guess by default, you'd think maybe that would have maybe been pushed more on me, something like that. But my parents never really pushed anything that or pushed any sort of career path or do this or do that. I'd say for me, it's something like, and I don't know if this totally answers your question, but I think maybe, it's something like, I really want to prove to myself that I can do this.
Right.
I don't know where that comes from, but prove to myself that the things that I think that I care about, and that by sharing that and by being open about that, I think I've allowed a little room for other people that kind of felt stifled or whatever to say, I feel something similar. I will say this, I think that maybe some of this comes, I was closeted for a long time, really into my mid and almost late 20s in some ways. And that sort of monster, when you're not operating with a full set of emotions all the time, when you're not even, it's not that you're lying outright necessarily, but you're lying by omission a lot. People could ask me something, were you on a date last night? And maybe I was on a date with a guy, but that I could lie without really lying intentionally. Like, you just start doing things. I used to describe it as, it would be like, a human, you're supposed to have the full set of emotions. It's like a painter should have the full set of colors in front of them. But imagine saying to a painter, sorry, you can't use blue. Right. And I think that for people that are closeted right now, and I'm sure someone watching this right now is in the closet, when you don't use your full set of emotions, that is your inherent birthright, your God-given gift, whatever you want to call it, you will sort of crush yourself. You'll crush your own spirit. And I think as I kind of overcame that, it sort of became my mission to live as full as I can, and we all fail at this all the time. We all do. I am by no means perfect. We're all a work in progress. We all want to be more aware all the time and more present all the time and nicer to everybody or whatever it is. But I think something about that, sort of like a certain authenticity that I had gotten rid of accidentally, or that society sort of pushed on me or whatever it is. And by the way, I don't want anyone to look at me a victim for any of that. Like I don't, and I can tell you things that happened to me that were bad and where I was actually a victim and all kinds of other stuff. But I don't want any credit on any of that stuff. I want to be judged by sort of where I'm at now and try to continue to do that. It's just built in. It's just built in.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I mean, if I were to turn it on myself, I don't think I have any scripts that were handed down to me from my parents or from the environment. But if I were to answer it in the following sense, is there something in my disposition? So that's not a script from the outside. It's part of my innate nature.
Right, it's internal.
Right? That I can use to describe many, trajectories that I've taken in life, and I think I could answer that because I sort of thought about it. I've thought about it in the past, but in preparing for this conversation, for that question, I thought about it. So, and I would start it by answering it in one word: freedom, and you'll understand what I mean in a second. So, when I used to be a soccer player, I used to play what's called the number 10 position, even though I didn't wear number 10. The number 10 position is the playmaker. It's kind of like the point guard in basketball or the quarterback, right? It's the guy who all the balls are going through. He's the guy who typically has a lot of skills and moves around and really controls the flow of the game. And whenever I had a coach who did not appreciate that quality in me, that he would say, well, you're going to have to mark this guy back. You're going to play more on the left side of midfield today. I construed those as restrictions of my freedom. And suddenly I would no longer be able to play well because I didn't have the freedom to go out into the field and create. And now let me give you that exact same manifestation of freedom or lack thereof in other cases. When I went into academia, I detested the orthodoxy of academia. And I'm not talking about just the group think of political correctness, but just within academia. Humans are not biological beings. I said, bullshit. I went out and I founded a discipline called evolutionary consumption, where you apply evolutionary psychology to consumer behavior. Now push that to our respective public engagements. I now see the attacks on freedom. That upsets me. That angers me. That injures me in the most personal of ways. Therefore, I come out. I interact with people because I want to defend freedom. So I think if I were to describe what makes SAAD tick in terms of a grand dispositional script, it would be give me freedom.
Give me freedom or give me death. I love that, Gad, and I know that that's absolutely true and within you. And the only thing I can add to that is it's like, look, if I didn't do this thing that I'm doing and be able to share my thoughts and learn from people every week, as I genuinely do learn from somebody every week. Sometimes I learn from them because I realize they don't know what they're talking about, and that's a learning lesson. But usually I learn from them because I have some pretty bright people on here. But basically, if I didn't do this, I think I'd be completely insane. You know what I mean? Like if I was just a guy at a job doing my thing, and right. And I don't mean this to besmirch anyone at a traditional job, but I know the way I'm wired now, and I'd still be having all of these thoughts, and I'd want to get it somehow. And I'm pretty sure all my coworkers would hate me because I'd be the guy at the water cooler in the morning going, "Did you see this?" So thankfully I'm doing it here because otherwise it would not be a pretty picture.
Last question, then we wrap it up, and then when we wrap it up, stay so that we could just chat offline for a minute or two. I think I might have posed this question to two guys who in a sense couldn't be more diametrically opposed from one another. I think I asked it of Jordan Peterson and of Deepak Chopra, who also came on my show. I don't know if you watched that chat.
I did see a little bit of that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So if you look at the psychology of regret, there is a thing called regret by commission or regret by omission, right? So, I really regret that I never became a dancer. I should have pursued my love of dance, right? That's regret by omission, by inaction. Versus regret by action is, I really regret that I screwed up my marriage and that I philandered on my wife. And when you ask most people what is their biggest regret, the pattern turns out, and actually this is from a set of brilliant studies from one of my former professors at Cornell, psychologist by the name of Tom Gilovich, people are much more likely to state that their greatest source of regret is an inaction. So in your case, if I ask you again, forgive me, I know these are deep questions and I'm putting you on the spot, but
no, I love it. I love it.
Okay, great. Is there one or two sources of regret that you could share with us that really have burned you? And I tell you what mine is that I wasn't able, because of both my career-ending injuries and other life circumstances, to pursue my soccer career to its end. That's my regret. What are some of yours?
Yeah, well, I wish I could have been a professional basketball player, but let's put that one aside. That's not really a source of regret. Right. I don't know that the NBA was looking for 5'11", white guys with bad knees. But putting that aside,
don't denigrate 5'11" when you're talking to a guy who on a good day is 5'7". And I'm exaggerating.
Sorry about that.
Okay, go on.
I didn't mean to use my height privilege with you. Well, I'll tell you this. My regret is not the one that you said is the more common one, the regret of omission. It's definitely not that. It's not that. I will tell you what it is in a moment. But my regret is not that, because I think I'm so proud of what I've built now. I'm so proud of the conversations that I'm part of. I'm so proud of the amount of guests, people who I've truly admired, yourself included, who I've become friends with, who I dine with, and who know my family, and that I've gotten to know their families, and the high level conversations when I go to, people who I don't even want to mention, when I go to houses and have these incredible hours and hours of deeply philosophical, rich conversations, or host them at my house, and I go, holy cow. There's a great line in The Simpsons where Homer's I forget what he wants to be done, but he's going, somebody should do that. And then he goes, I should do it. I'm a guy like me. And every now and again, I do have these moments where I'm like, oh, I'm a guy like me. I'm a guy that got into this thing and is actually doing it. And that's pretty cool. So in terms of my life trajectory, I did somehow build something that I'm very proud of. So I don't have a regret of omission. I would say that my one regret is sort of related to my answer to your previous question, which is my regret would be that because I was closeted for so long and dealt with and sat in that pain for so long, which is not good. I can't really, I can't explain it to you properly. You really, it's one of those things that you almost have to live through to really understand. And I had so much self-hate for so long, and that comes out in all kinds of different ways, drugs and sex and whatever. Because I think that some of that stuff, it's still in me somewhere. You know what I mean? Like every now and again, it can just pop up like a way that I used to remember myself. And it's not the me that's here now, but it's someone that I knew, right, that's back there. And the thoughts of that, the echoes of that, I think can still sometimes affect me. Now, ironically, I think that they're also, and this goes to, I think, your first question, some of those things actually become the good traits about me too, because it taught me tolerance, because I was somebody that was in pain and may have acted out in ways that I'm not proud of. But I would say the regret is that it wasn't that, my regret is not that the world treated me badly or that gays couldn't get married or any of that. That's not my regret. My regret is that it was an inside job for me in a way. And that's why, as I say all the time, that's why equality is so important. I don't want to be treated special. I don't want to be thought of as a victim, any of those things. I want to be equal so that we can treat each other as shitty as we treat anybody else.
I've heard you say that before.
Yeah, and but that's the real truth. So I would say the regret is that I really banged myself up for a long time, and somehow some of that stuff just sticks with you.
So in
and
a
it
sense,
just pops up in ways that you
had you recognized that truth that you speak of today, then you could have saved yourself a lot of pain. That's in a sense what the regret is.
Exactly, and that it just doesn't go away. All of your haunts of your life don't just magically disappear because you start living better or living right. The thought patterns, the whatever it is, like some of that stuff just stays with you. But it's your job as a person. It's your job as a person to keep growing. And unfortunately, these days we see so many people who are narrowing their mind constantly, and generally as you get older, your mind narrows a bit. But I love being part of this group of people now that we really are challenging each other. We're defending each other publicly. That's a lot more fun than having to defend yourself on Twitter. And that's why every time, if I see you get attacked unfairly or Peterson or Sam or whoever it is, it's like, I want to help you guys because it's not funny. It's not funny. It's not fun to be the bounty hunter alone out there in the universe. What's more fun is when you have some people around you who are all fighting for basically the same things, and you all want to enrich each other and make each other better. And I think partly we're doing that right now.
What a bromance we have developed, Mr. Rubin. You are truly one of the most affable, lovely guys I know, and I'm proud to call you a friend. Is there any promotional stuff? Not that you need my little show as a platform to promote your stuff, since you're about 80 times bigger than me. But
I would say to people, watch 5-time Rubin Report guest Gad Saad on the Rubin Report. I'm sure there's a playlist. I'm sure we have a playlist link. With just your interviews. We'll post that down below. You don't even have to find it if they just want to hear more. Oh, and you know what would be interesting for people to watch that? It's not just the 2 years ago that we did this on your channel, but really, you were the first guest when I moved my show to Aura, and it was a test show, actually. And if you just watch the way, not just that our friendship has been enriched, obviously, but the way we've talked about these things and the way the landscape has changed around us, I actually do think it's really interesting. And you can't forget where you came from, and you have to be aware of that. And and you're just the best, and anytime we can do this. Now get back to SoCal already. I don't know what you're doing up there. It's cold.
I won't say anything, but some of the murmurs I'm hearing about some people who are upset with me, maybe I'll be coming to Southern California faster than you know. We'll see. We'll keep trying. You keep trying to help me. I'll be there soon. Go ahead.
My green room here is also a pull-out bed. That might be a bit much for you, the 2 kids, the wife, the dogs.
Exactly.
But it's here. It's here.
The 2 dogs, because I have a female dog. Your dog is a female. We need to make sure that these 2 can get along, right?
Lesbian dogs. It's very hot these days.
What a pleasure talking to you. Stay on the line. Thank you so much, Dave, for coming on the show.
Thanks, Gad.
Cheers.